Because this craziness, this sickness in this country now is shot through the whole society. You know, people in law enforcement have also succumbed to right-wing extremism and white nationalism. Again, what this points up is how pervasive and vast a problem this is, and we will be dealing with it for a long time.
Welcome to my band.
Tell us a rapping joke.
What song is it, Fitzy?
It's for the Evers.
Okay, this is for the Evers.
Woo!
Whoa! Jim, stop, guys. You know what?
Cops.
You guys noticed, Rappy's been humming along. Maybe you get up stage and hum a bit more, sir?
Rappy is welcome on our stage anytime he wants,
Come
man.
up anytime, man.
Good story, brah. His dick's still on the stage.
Raph, seriously? Raph. Focus. Raph. Raph. You're not Clint. You can join us anytime.
Those are the rules, aren't they?
Check, no Raph's good.
Fucking way she goes.
Sorry?
It's the fucking way she goes. Sometimes she goes. Sometimes she don't go. It's the fucking way she goes, boys.
Science. You learned to reject. Learn how to reject reflex. Don't do this. No.
Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, this is one of our altar boys here at the ministry. His name is Little Timmy, and he wants to introduce the next song.
This next song's about the time when I was doing real bad in my life, and I needed the Lord.
Needed the Lord! Yeah!
And so the Lord, He went through Father Ted here. Father Ted brought me to his office after church, and he laid his hands all over me. And Jesus touched me. Jesus touched me through Father Ted. Father Ted's hands all over me brought me Jesus.
Now we'll continue to bring you Jesus every time you are a bad boy and you are a naughty boy. This song is called Rickety Bridge.
I said, something's wrong here, something's really wrong, can't have happened, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. As this enormous crowd shows, we have truth and justice on our side. So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania. And we're going to the Capitol. We're going to try and give our Republicans, we're going to try and give them the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America. We will never give up. We will never concede.
We can take that place.
And then do what?
Take on fine.
enjoy the fuck out of that video. I'm very proud of that. We did good work, us Bodies of Everest folks. Yeah, we're now back recording, working on new material. It's a bunch of fun to be in that band. And I've been re-recording a couple of the songs that we've done. Our process is very, very modern in that there was a pandemic. So we learned how to write remotely and work together collaboratively using interweb. And that has been really good. So yeah, yesterday I took a little clump of a song, like a little 30-second snippet that the drummer had done with drums and guitar, and I built a whole bass line around the song. That was kind of cool. So there's now like a whole song that just has like drums and guitar proper in like a little a chunk here and a chunk here and a chunk there, and the rest of it, in order to be not awful, I made a very simple metronome type 4/4 beat using the audio tool that I have. I have a thing called Reaper, and there's a plugin called Get Good Drums, and Get Good Drums is awesome, and it allows people like me to do cool things like pretend we're drummers. So it's kind of cool. How's everyone doing? I'm doing great. It's like day 2 without a headache, or day 3 now. Day 3 without a headache. We're in the middle of a Chinook here in Calgary. Chinooks are, for those uninitiates, Chinook is the thing that happens when the right kind of weather exists in the right kind of places. Why is my... That's not good. I just noticed a thing. Give me 1 second. I have to just fix something. Chinooks are good. And essentially what happens with Chinooks is you get like a cool breeze, I think, it's a warm breeze from the west that sort of traps a pocket of warm air in the inversion layer that I live in, and as a result, shit, that's not good. None of my browser tabs are working. Well, we'll just have to quickly create a new one, because apparently, give me 1 second. This was working 10 seconds ago. I'm assuming you want something? No? Okay. Browser. Where's my window capture? Create new. We'll call it browse. Yeah, this is exciting for everyone I know. Where's the thing? Google, yeah, I'm sorry. There was a whole thing where suddenly my all of my browser stuff just decided it didn't want to be a browser anymore. And now I'm not even seeing. Okay, we're gonna cancel. No, we're gonna discard. I don't know what's going on. And we'll try this again. Where is... Cool. My browser window completely doesn't exist. So we'll try starting a new one. It existed, don't get me wrong. It was there, it was real. Do I have... I feel like... Yeah, we're doing that thing where OBS is fucking up. You know what? I hate to be tacky, but I'm going to restart OBS real quick and see if that helps. So if you're watching, stick around. I'll be right back. Shit. Okay. I theoretically am back. I don't know if that is going to create a whole new video in YouTube. I don't know if it's going to refresh properly in whatchamacallit thing. Twitch. Sorry, I'm just trying to deal with my stupid ass life. I'm just going to try and get this back roughly where it was. Yeah, you can play your Xbox, just don't be loud. Parenting. I'm super good at it. A lot of people don't realize how genuinely amazing a dad I am, but, you know, facts. Okay, so that one's back. And then I'm going to copy and paste. And move down here. Sorry, this is super fucking annoying. Because all this was here earlier. Now I have to switch to... I'm gonna... You know what? We were gonna talk about Matt Walsh. So let's just jump to that right now. So I can readjust my screen size stuff. Matt Walsh reads, which is impressive because I didn't think Matt Walsh could read. But okay, let me just quickly size this, and then we will be good to go. I promise. Okay, 2 seconds. I just need this. Yeah. So like I always check my shit before I get going, and. Wait, is this now fucking... Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah, now it's working just fine. So that's cool. I'm glad that I had all this fun experience here. All right, so let's do this. And we're going to watch... this is Matt Walsh. You may know Matt from his career as a right-wing agitating prick. In this case, he's written a book which he called Johnny the Walrus, and he's going to read it to children. He's a super far right creep, and what he's going to be trying to get at is that children are being indoctrinated by the woke left to ensure that the woke left, who are intrinsically evil, make all children trans, and this book is really just awful. And the reason I wanted to watch this isn't because I want to give him the time of day. It's because I genuinely think that like this is a thing that I would qualify as abusive. It's a PR stunt, but like watch how this goes with the chillins.
Okay. Hello, boys and girls. My name is Matt Walsh. I am a children's author, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is all about identity and imagination. What is identity? Does anyone know what identity is?
Yes, he says it's all about identity and imagination, which is his very, very not right-wing commando version of saying this is about identity politics and gender, and he's about to proselytize to children.
Means?
No.
Do you know? You know what identity is? No? Okay. It's who you are, right? That's what it means. Now, who likes to pretend to be things? Is there anything you like to pretend to be? How about in the back?
I like to pretend to be
a ninja. That's a good one. What about you? All right. Well, we all like to use our imagination. Sometimes I use my...
Those vacant stares from the children, that is what I imagine Matt Walsh's love life looks like. Just while he's sitting on a chair performing, they're just...
All right. Well, we all like to use our imagination. Sometimes I use my imagination. I pretend to be a monster. I chase my kids around because I'm big and ugly, so I could be a monster. That's what this book is about. It's all about a boy who pretends to be a walrus.
So when you're interacting with kids like this, you actually want to engage them. That's a thing. I happen to know this because I did children's theater as a unit in grade 11 drama. So like if you'd said like, "'Cause I'm big and ugly, right?" and the kids were like, "Yeah," the kids would enjoy the piss out of that so much more than him just like, "Yeah, and I do this because it is fun and my children enjoy it." And yeah. So anyways,
he identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. That's silly, isn't it?
So is this thing doing on the floor?
We don't have to worry about that. We're going to read the book now. Okay.
That's his way of saying, "Shut up, kid."
Johnny's a boy with a big imagination. One day he's a dog, the next day a crustacean. It's like a crab or a lobster. One morning he came downstairs barking and clapping, wood spoons for tusks and sock fins a-flapping. He had spoons in his mouth. He was pretending to be a walrus. "I'm Johnny the Walrus," he said with a roar. "The wood floor's my ocean. The carpet's my shore." He's swimming around like a walrus. Isn't that so?
No different than religious
Johnny's
Sunday
mom
school.
loves
Yes,
her son's
absolutely.
make-believe time. "You're Johnny the Walrus till you change your mind," Mommy says. But Johnny's mom's phone said it's not just pretend. So she went on her phone, and there were people telling her that this isn't pretend. He's really a walrus.
So this is the crux of what Matt's bringing to the table here. So Johnny has an active imagination and is enjoying pretending. And then his mom, who is a big dumb stupid, was like, "Oh, I'm going to check Google," and typed in, "Is my child a walrus?" To which all of the woke left were like, "Why, yes. Yes, your child really is a walrus, and you have to respect that." He's making a point, is he not? The crux? We're getting to the point.
Walrus. Only a bigot would say that. How dare you offend? What's a bigot? Anybody know?
Like these kids
A
know
mean
what the
person,
fuck that
right?
means.
Mommy was told to take John for a checkup. All these people are holding signs. "Johnny is a real walrus," one sign says. "Human walruses are real walruses."
So here's the thing about it's perhaps a little bit subtle, but what he's talking about is trans identities. I know, subtle as all fuck. And so Johnny says, "I am a walrus." That's the same as Johnny saying, "I am a girl." And then instead of the reasonable reactions, everyone is like, "That means you have to be a girl now because woke." And so we're going to the doctor. Let's also take take account of the number of times Johnny shows any kind of agency in this decision. Okay, cool.
Johnny transition, all these people are saying.
Huge
"You'll need to
straw
eat
man.
worms and to put on gray makeup. The worms give you whiskers, the gray blends you in," the doctor says. "And a simple procedure cuts feet into fins." The doctor wants to cut into Johnny and make him into a walrus.
Now, look at these kids' faces. To me, this is like legitimately abusive. This is legitimately, what the fuck is wrong with Matt Walsh? And he's like, "Oh, this will be all right. I'll just scare the ever-loving fuck out of children with this sinister drawing and the obvious implication that I'm going to start hacking chunks off of this boy to make him a walrus." Fucking gross.
That's scary.
"It's gross eating worms, Mom. They're all so dang twitchy." He doesn't want to eat worms.
Worms are bad for you. I thought.
So there's Johnny, who has previously said, "I am a girl," now saying, "I actually am not." But the woke mob won't listen.
I didn't eat worms, but I did.
"Wood spoons kind of hurt,
Oh,
and the
look
makeup
at
is
that. Look
itchy."
at the little kid says the innocent thing. Watch Matt's face.
He doesn't want to eat worms.
Worms are bad for you. I thought I didn't eat worms, but I did.
Just
Woods-
like, "Are you fucking kidding me, child?"
I thought I didn't eat worms, but I did.
"Wood
You dirty shit. Worm-eating bastard.
spoons kind of hurt, and the makeup is itchy." Deep down, Johnny's mom knew that something was wrong. Look at Johnny. He's dressed up like a walrus, but he's not having a fun time. But she felt so much pressure, she just went along.
The woke mob
The internet
is
people
making
knew
her.
just what to do. She went back to the internet to look for answers. Never a good idea. And mommy was told to take John to the zoo. Now she's going to take her son to go live at the zoo like he's a real walrus.
I don't want to live at the zoo.
When Johnny...
And that's actually very much like if you ever go on the internet and you type in, I think my child may be a transgender person, they say you now have to enroll them in an all-girls school away from home. That's exactly what happens.
When he arrived, the walruses grunted. And the mommy says, my boy's a real walrus. His growth was just stunted. I mean, she really thinks this kid is a walrus.
But he's not.
No.
The child. The child just gleaned the whole concept. Matt's a great storyteller. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's not preaching to these kids. He's preaching to the pious. This is essentially inflicting this terrible, terrible book with ugly imagery onto these children for the purposes of promoting this ridiculous, hateful attitude. The kids are just collateral damage. Exactly.
The zookeeper thought, what's she talking about? Ma'am, that's just a boy with wood spoons in his mouth. Now he's the voice of reason. Yeah. Right? But
that's the same as when someone says, what are you talking about? You aren't a woman, you're a man. They're the voice of reason.
I believe that, they'll say that I'm phobic. Protecting your son, ma'am, is what's most heroic. At last, Johnny's mommy was able to see that Johnny's not what he's pretending to be. Now mommy ignores the mean things on her phone, while Johnny pretends he's a bird flying home. The end.
Aww, it had a happy ending where he didn't get vivisected by horrible leftists.
No, I just sat down and wrote it. There's another one there. We got a bunch of them. They're going to be all over the place soon enough. You can ask your parents to buy it for you.
Oh, Matt, you fucking shill. So yeah, that was a thing that happened. I have seen several people talk about this particular video and mocking him for the quality of writing, which obviously it's not a great book from, when compared to even children's books. I'm not like, it's no Homer's Odyssey, but it's like not a great book when compared to children's books. It's not a great book when compared to like pretty much anything. And the fact that this is a thing that people are focused on is not even about the book. This is about Matt Walsh being a fucking terrible human being, and literally being prepared to make children watch or read this scary fucking book with him so that he can get a little bit of internet cred. What? That's pretty cool. I want to be just like him. I'm going to turn this lamp on because I just realized I didn't do that. And as a result, as my youngest child plays Grand Theft Auto and does all of the crimes, every time the lighting changes, my face gets brighter and darker. And you just need this in bright, just in top sex mode. So I'll be 1 second. That's right. If you want to defeat the evils of Grand Theft Auto, just turn on a light, man. That's all it takes. So yeah, I am Canadian. It's good to see you, my friend. I hope you're doing well. I have a few ideas for things we can talk about today, but I did get me a copy of the Epoch Times delivered to me. So if we want to just learn about what the Chinese Communist Party's doing, that would be okay. Ironically, this came this week when last week I sang in karaoke Stewart by the Dead Milkman, which is about a very, very deranged soul sitting in his trailer park drunk talking to a kid named Stewart about how the queers are ruining the soil. So it would have been nice to have an Epoch Times to refer to. But so that's just nice and handy. If you go too far, I'll just whip out the Epoch Times and hit you with some facts. Hit you with the newspaper, as it were. How are things? I am Canadian. The kids are just collateral damage. Yes. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, I had an awkward start to the stream. My OBS decided that it would not OBS. So I had to restart my stream, which is deeply annoying. But, you know, life is life. Here we are. Other than that, I'm good. We're in the midst of a Chinook. I was talking about that earlier. So I don't have a crazy migraine right now, which is super all right with me. I had I wouldn't say a crazy migraine, but I had a pretty decent migraine for like 6 days. So that's what living in Calgary is. But on the plus side, it's on the plus side. We are now 9 degrees outside, I think. Let's just check our weather app, shall we? Weather apps. Yeah, 9 degrees outside, which is a balmy temperature, especially for a Canadian winter. So, you know, winning. That's a good thing. All right, I'm gonna ramble. We were talking. I didn't want to dwell on Matt Walsh because he's just a fucking chud. But you know, I was thinking about talking about some Christianity, and you know, between the comments from I Am Canadian and Matt Walsh's incredibly powerful arguments, maybe it's a good time to talk about some Jesus. So I have, you know, I'm a non-believer and a monster and all of the things, and that works for me. You know, I sell it well, but I do get creeped out about religion. I first got into the whole thing of you know, putting content onto the YouTubes, or on the internet, back in the early days of the skeptic movement, when I was a skeptic and a member of or an atheist. I wouldn't say I was a member of organized atheism or anything like that, but I certainly was, you know, I was around that world. And I've talked in past about how that was such a surreal time, because everything went from being like legitimately interesting and all of these people sort of angrily talking about religion, and then all of a sudden it hyper-focused on feminism, and it hyper-focused on Islam, and, you know, guys like Sargon of Akkad were suddenly like a part of that world, and huge voices, and I was like, there's a lot of bad racist shit happening here. I'm done. But I do have this, at the core of me, I have this genuine dislike of religion. And specifically, so I've been watching Fundy Fridays, which is another YouTube channel, which I highly recommend people take a look at. And on Fundy Fridays, essentially the host, who I believe is named Jen, does her makeup while talking about various aspects of the fundamentalist Christian movement. And so my challenge with Christianity, and I see this play out with my parents, is much like when you just start watching Joe Rogan, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're watching Ben Shapiro, and the next thing you know, you're storming the Capitol. That pipeline, there's like a religious equivalent of that. And my folks went from, the church that I grew up in was the super left-leaning, love your neighbor hippie church, and now they're like little evangelicals, and they do evangelical things, and they talk about, like, well, you know, it's not like we care if anyone was like a gay, but they clearly do, and it's just really interesting to me, this evangelical pipeline. And so I was watching a video today, and it made me think quite a bit when it was talking about the charismatic Christian movement, which is part of evangelism, or I think maybe charismatic Christian is evangelist, but it's this, like, to me, anytime I hear charismatic, I'm always like imagining a dictator, and that's not far from the case. The thing is that it has such a twisted relationship with God. Now, again, I'm an atheist. I do not believe in God. I was raised in a Christian church. I'm not here to shit talk God, although fuck you, God. But to me, again, I was raised in this super like positive Christian environment. I don't have those stories of being like battered and abused by my faith or anything like that. The world that I grew up in was really, really positive and really, really good, for want of a better term. And this is not the case with the charismatic Christian world. There's so like, and I started to notice it. I mean, I've always noticed it in the sort of the extreme examples. It's the evangelists that are quick to, take on things like abortion rights or homosexual marriage or whatever, and very, very regressive attitudes based on scripture, and that weirds me out a little bit. But I would go to my parents' church in this other city, and I would go with them because my mom's a singer and she would sing in the choir or she would have solos. And I want to support my mom. I want to see my mom sing, so I'd go. And there's things that they do that I find real spooky, like almost spooky dooky. One of them is the Fine Art of Hyperventilation. So when I was a kid, it was a United Church that I went to, and that meant that we had the sort of traditional United Church hymnal, which had all sorts of songs that were like, God, you're super, Jesus was a lamb. And they're all very simple, and they're all very, like, easy to sing. And they're mostly lifeless and uninteresting. But, they do the job. They get you in the mood kind of thing. When I go to the more charismatic church, you have like 20-25 minutes of singing at the start of things, and that is all like these songs that are so like, they describe an abusive relationship. They're like, dear Jesus, I don't know how you can love me like you do, 'cause I'm such a giant piece of shit, but you know that I am, and you don't judge me. Like, literally hours and hours of this, like, singing about this abusive relationship. And then, sort of to add to that, you have this vibe that comes through of all the songs are written in a slightly higher key than I was used to. I have more of a baritone voice, probably not a bass voice, but certainly a baritone. And these songs largely are written in that like tenor and upper tenor range. And I was watching as people were singing one time, and my mom is like crying tears of joy. And so my mom has a degree in music, like she knows things. And afterwards we were talking, and she's like, man, it was so beautiful. The singing in the beginning was so beautiful. I was moved to tears. I could really feel God. And I was like, Mom, you were hyperventilating. You're singing at the top part of your register where you have to use the most breath and diaphragm to control and not pass out. So you're like literally singing the hardest notes you can. And the notes are written specifically for that, so that you're taking deep breaths and you're constantly out of breath and you're constantly struggling to catch your breath, and you end up hyperventilating, and suddenly you get this weird euphoria. That's not God, that's oxygen deprivation. Like, you fucking know this, Mom. You have a degree in this. How can you miss this shit? Really, really weirds me out. And the reason I brought that up is I watched this fucking clip on Fundy Fridays of, she was talking about, what's the name of the group? IHOP. Not International House of Pancakes, International House of Prayer, which is a whole separate fucking monster in and of itself. And remember that time when you were like, hey Dad, do you mind if I play video games? I'll be really quiet and not distracting at all. IHOP, International House of Prayer. This guy was, like they're singing these Christian songs, and it's literally like, I want the fire to come down and destroy us all. Bring your wrath, God. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like this, it's the Left Behind vibe and all of this, like the end times death cult aspect of Christianity that just fucking grosses me out. And yeah, it just gets under my skin. And that sort of led to, she was talking about the Uganda homosexuality laws and Scott Lively. And that's always been, like, I remember writing in my old blog, Meddling Kids, which no longer exists. Sorry, internet. I wrote a thing about Scott Lively and the group that went to Uganda. Is it Uganda? I think it was Uganda. Or Ghana. I can't remember which. I know it had a G in it, and it was in Africa. But they had with the help of Scott and a couple of these other charismatic Christians, they had drafted this legislation that would allow them to put homosexuals to death. And then that got changed because, woke culture, and to life in prison. So, yay progress. And this was literally like a bunch of right-wing Christians going to a whole other country and, like, helping them be the worst version of themselves. And that was the thing that rang out to me. I was like, the Christianity that I grew up in, while I disagree with it and while I find it very frustrating to sort of reconcile, at the same time, it was at least good. It was decent. It taught good morality. And people always talk about how, there's no morals without Jesus, and without the Bible, and without blah. So therefore, as an atheist, clearly I'm a immoral monster who will burn in all of hellfire. One sec. But the morality that they talk about is so not moral. Like last week we were joking about Onan, the story of, God, I sound like a Bible stream. Onan is the basis behind why you can't have abortions and why you can't masturbate, particularly for Catholics. It's an Old Testament story. Basically, dude's brother dies. God's like, bro, you gotta take his sister or his wife for your wife. And the guy's like, God, I get that, but I don't really feel good about that. And God's like, no, you have to. He's like, okay, fine. She's my wife now. This is my wife. And then God's like, okay, now that she's your wife, go fuck her. And the dude's like, dude, I can't. I don't wanna have sex with my dead brother's wife. And God's like, oh, you will have sex with your dead brother's wife. And Onan's like, nah, dude, I don't consent to this. And then God's like, your consent means nothing to me because I am the all-powerful God. I am he who is called I am, and you will fuck that girl. And so Onan's like, well, God's bigger than me. He's bigger than everyone. I better fuck that girl. So God essentially removed his consent, made him fuck this woman that he was not attracted to. So that's cringe. And then Onan was like, pull out game, because I don't want to make a baby in my dead brother's wife's tummy. And God was like, I demand a cream pie, and killed him. And I'm just like, this is the source of morality? This is the thing that as an atheist I couldn't possibly be moral because of this? This is why people are supposed to not get abortions. Because if you fuck, you better have a baby or God will hurt you. It's why you're not allowed to use birth control. Because if you fuck, you better have a baby or God will hurt you. It's why you can't masturbate. Because if you nut, God's watching and he's watching with an angry face. Which is strange because I don't know if you know this about the world, but turns out a lot of people masturbate, like more than 15. And none of them die as a result of being smoted. So I don't know. Maybe God's not telling us the whole picture. What do you think? I don't know. I find the whole religious thing real skeevy. And I mean, cool. Believe what you want to believe. I'm not going to tell you not to believe. If it brings you joy and it brings you some comfort in the world, that's great. As long as you're not harming others. Because that's what my morality is. It's actually not based on being religious or fearing God's divine retribution or any of that shit. It's just based on, the concept of doing the most benefit and the least harm in all the things I do. So, I look at Westboro Baptist Church and like, you guys do the most harm. And y'all think, very rightly, you believe that you're doing God's work. Because that same book that justifies all of the hippie happy bullshit that I grew up with also justifies protesting at soldiers' funerals that fags are ruining the world. That's the same book. And it's not even like a fringe interpretation. That's the thing that I find so fucking surreal about it. I saw Nate Phelps talk. He actually lived at the time in the my hometown, and he did a talk at the university, and it was so fascinating. Talking about growing up in the Westboro Baptist Church and leaving the Westboro Baptist Church, and that sense of like they were raised to believe that this is what right looks like. This is what good looks like. You should do these things. And his own coming to grips with the fact that like this isn't just wrong. It's genuinely fucking awful. And I'm not okay with this. Like it was really fascinating. If you ever get the chance to see Nate Phelps speak, I highly suggest it. He's part of the organized atheism world. I believe, I don't know what he's still doing, but at the time he was involved with the Center for, what is CDI? I can't even think of what the fucking, but he was part of CDI Calgary, and they would put on talks. They brought out people like P.Z. Myers, and yeah, it was well worth it. Speaking of P.Z. Myers, again, since the chat appears to be empty, it says, according to Chatterino, I'm streaming to exactly one person. And when I look at the followers, who's on, I see two names that may be humans. Roxy, I think, or Roxeezy, and Action Shin. If either of you are human, feel free to join in the chat. I'm a small streaming Andy, so if you don't chat with me, I'm just going to be the one chatting. So that's a thing. Gonna drink some coffee here. But so I've been watching a bunch of Xander Hall videos lately, just because I hadn't followed Xander Hall before, and was like, hey, I should watch Xander Hall, just in time for Thought Slime to say he was being oppressed by Xander Hall's fans because once upon a time, something about a sex cult. I don't care. I'm not talking about that. Xander Hall was talking quite a bit lately about the Gamergate days and the anti-SJW days. And this is fascinating shit to me because I was there for this, but not like in a YouTube way. I had a blog and I was involved in like I said, organized atheism and skeptic events and things. And I watched this happen from my perspective, and I was like, well, this is just dumb. This is just dumb. This will pass. And anti-SJW content became huge. And when like P.Z. Myers started Free Thought blogs, and the whole idea was to have like a place for free thinkers, like his buddy Thunderfoot, who was on. And then Thunderfoot was like, why can't I rape? And the people on the network were like, 'cause you shouldn't. And he was like, you can't tell me what to do. Only God could judge me. And it went exactly predictably down the toilet. Thunderfoot left. Later on, Ophelia Benson would leave over her being such a fucking turf. Who else? Can't remember the name of the dude, but he was a guy who regularly was like using his position as a lecturer and professor to score with babes as you do. Got the punt, like it was actually a bit of a rat's nest. But anyways, I'm way digressing. Xander Hall's whole thing is he thinks that this is going to come back. And I don't disagree. His argument is there's this new generation that's coming to, geek age, where they will start to engage with content, and people will. It probably won't be as Islamophobic and racist as it is, or as it was, but certainly the cringe compilations of wokes being cringe are certainly on the rise, and all of this. And I can't help but think that he's probably right. I remember people watching those cringe videos like Big Red and being like, that's what feminism are. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm a feminist. You're a soy? You know what? I'm fucking soy. Say it to my face, bitch. Not terribly soy as it happens. But yeah, people were, it's just this sort of brain rot of, well, this is what my ideological enemies are. And I have to agree. I think that because we're living in Biden's America, the vast number of people who are sort of like middle of the road humans will probably be like, hey, there's funny memes. This guy said something about attack helicopters. Haha, lol. And the left is really bad for overdoing it and for overplaying the cards of the extremely, extremely left. And this is kind of across the board. Like Big Red wasn't a typical feminist, but she was a good poster for feminism. And rather than going, yeah, that was cringy, the left was like, shut up, you can't attack her. Gamergate is a whole different monster. Obviously, Anita Sarkeesian didn't deserve fuck all for what she got out of these people. And they really should have been dick punched over the way that they treated her. But this is life. It's there. My hope is that we can have people putting out content that talks about some of this stuff and goes, hey, look, I'm actually not an insane person. I am a leftist. I am a socialist. But I'm not, a deluded tanky who thinks that we need to roll tanks into all of our cities and shit like that. Made me think of, since I'm rambling and I'm going to ramble, made me think of seeing that, I guess, they're overblowing this who's taller Destiny versus Haas thing. And Haas, for the record, is just Deepak Chopra for tankies. I'm not a big Destiny fan. In fact, I think the only time I've ever watched Destiny debate has been when he's been on a panel with some other people that I want to watch. Not that I dislike him or anything. I don't know enough about him to care. But he just reminds me of that guy from Dazed and Confused. I want to dance. He's just that guy. And every time I see him debating, I'm just like, oh, you're good at this, but wow, you're cringy. So I don't pay attention to him. But I guess they had a debate. I saw their debate because I was like, well, I want to see Haas get beat. And I did. They did this debate for Modern Day Debates about whether or not Biden was super pog. And the answer is no, kids. No, he's not. But he's better than it would have been in a Trump 2020 world. So they had this debate, and the chat, I was on YouTube watching this, and the chat was like losing it over who was fucking taller. And I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, I'm a tall fella. I'm not Hassan tall, but I'm 6'2". And it turns out I'm not right because I'm 6'2". I'm right because I'm wicked smart. And sometimes I'm even wrong. But there's this whole thing, and I think they're now playing it up. Haas has a video for Stop the Tilt, and alleging that the camera was tilted to make Destiny look bigger and all this stuff. And I think it's a meme. I hope it's a meme, but I don't know. Anyways, I don't remember where I was going there. Holy shit. That seems like it's probably a good time for me to take a pause. It's been a weird start to things, and yeah, I'm going to take a quick pause. I'm going to go stretch my lungs. I will return in a few minutes. In the meantime, I will leave you with some genuinely awful music that I think is hilarious, that I make on my computer, and is exactly awful. And here we go. I feel like that needs to go up in volume a bit. There we go. Alright. BRB, LOL, ROFLMAO, STI. thing on my face, and then I will continue with whatever it is I'm going to do. Chat still appears to be completely... Oh, I Am Canadian's back. Hello, I Am Canadian. I'd like to tell you you missed a lot, but you really didn't. I just rambled a bunch. So I'm going to talk about morality and how we go do the whole thing of figuring out what's right and wrong. It's the reasoning behind this. I saw the drama unfold between Walsh and non-compete, no-compete, whatever his name is. The guy from Vietnam, honky dude, married to Luna Oi. And they had this discussion, and it was hilarious because non-compete did not understand what was happening. Walsh started doing the whole, like, you have to have a moral framework. And he was like, I don't have to have a moral framework. Material, what was it? The material... I can't even think of it's typical tanky talking point shit. Material reality defines whether something is good or not and all this shit. And Walsh was like, no, it doesn't. And then eventually started pushing on the whole issue of like World War II. Moral judgments are relative, not absolute. I totally agree. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So Walsh is... calls himself a identitarian. Rule utilitarian. Utilitarianism is basically the idea that the utility of an act is what defines its morality. And by that they mean the greatest amount of good done and the least amount of harm done. So you can get kind of lost in some of these definitions, but I found it an interesting rabbit hole because I'd never actually considered, what the philosophy stuff says behind it. For me, my morality derives from the fact that I am part of a social species living in a society, and I've always looked at, you should endeavor to do the most good that you can with the least harm that you can. So, using the moral judgments are relative, not absolute thing, punching a Nazi would be an example. In my mind, if you punch a Nazi, you are potentially scaring that Nazi away from doing more Nazi things notfully. And so the good of that act is much higher than the negative that comes from punching a person. Whereas if you punch, say, a little old lady on the bus, that probably isn't a morally sound decision because you are causing harm and there's no good. How is punch a Nazi good? Because maybe the Nazi learns to stay the fuck home and shut the fuck up. What if it simply angers them and makes them more aggressive? Well, and that's certainly a possibility. But the history of anti-fascism has been pretty clear on the fact that the more comfortable, you've just done it immoral. If that's the case, then yes. But the more comfortable that white supremacists feel in espousing their vitriol publicly, the more likely they are to ramp up their actions. In the past, where we have seen times where white supremacists have been active and they have been put down by anti-fascist actors, the end result has been to weaken the resolve and weaken the confidence of people. So as long as they're Nazi, it's okay to make them feel fear. Yes, I think it's perfectly reasonable to make them feel fear, especially given that their whole thing is to make others feel fear. We can call that a taste of your own medicine, but not the other way around. No, because Nazism at its core is not about the greater good for society. It is about the greater good for a particular subset of society, or at least the perceived greater good. And therefore, from a utilitarian standpoint, Nazi bad. Nazi very bad. So things you can do to increase the overall goodness to the world are good. That means punching a Nazi, A-okay with me. I know that just drives you nuts. I am Canadian. And it's probably not the most strong position that I could take. But that's how it's not an absolute. Absolutely not. There are no absolutes in life. That's why political and economic systems that try to be absolute are failures. Were there any good Nazis, Jim? Absolutely. I'm sure there were. There were probably people who were in the Nazi party who were not white supremacists. There were probably people in the Nazi party who were good people, aside from the fact that they were essentially ideologically contorted into this ridiculous death cult. Sure. Would I punch a good Nazi? Well, I don't really punch anyone these days. I'm kind of old. But yeah, I would. If that good Nazi was out marching and screaming, I want to kill Jews, then yeah, I'd feel pretty okay about punching that good Nazi. Because that means they're probably not a particularly good person. And I'm okay with punching the bad people. I hate Nazis, but I wouldn't make the moral claim punching them was good. Well, and again, I'm not saying it's absolute good. Required, sure. So let's. This is a good segue to talk about the thing that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to switch over here, and I'm going to jump to this browser, and we're going to dig in. So let's look at utilitarianism. So we're just going to Wikipedia because I don't feel the need to get too deep into the weeds here. That's shared. It looks like it's all right. All right. So real utilitarianism is a form of utilitarianism that says an action is right as it conforms to a rule that leads to the greatest good, or that the rightness or wrongness of a particular action is a function of the correctness of the rule of which it is an instance. This is Richard Brandt, Brad Hooker, major proponents of such an approach. For rule utilitarians, the correctness of a rule is determined by the amount of good it brings about when followed. So, using the example of a seatbelt law, the rule brings about good because even though people don't like the fact that they are being told by big government to wear a seatbelt, it does end up saving lives and therefore is a net good. In contrast, act utilitarians judge an act in terms of the consequences of that act alone, such as stopping at a red light, rather than judging whether it faithfully adhered to the rule of which it was an instance, such as always stop at red lights. Rule utilitarians argue that following rules that tend to lead to the greatest good will have a better consequence overall than allowing exceptions to be made in individual instances, even if better consequences can be demonstrated in those instances. So I would not say that I'm a rule utilitarian, because rules are absolute. And there is something called strong rule utilitarianism and weak rule utilitarianism. If anything, I would be a weak rule utilitarianism follower, simply because the strong is the adherent to, if this is a rule, you absolutely have to follow it every time. And I don't believe the world is absolute. So John Stuart Mill defends the concept of rights in terms of utility. To have a right, there is, I conceive, to have something which society ought to defend. Let me try that again. To have a right, then, is, I conceive, to have something which society ought to defend me in the possession of. If the objector goes on to ask why it ought, I can give him no other reason than general utility. Whether Mill was a rule utilitarian is a matter of controversy. The passage from Utilitarianism seems to suggest that he was. In the case of abstinences, indeed, of things which people forbear to do for moral considerations, though the consequences in the particular case might be beneficial, it might be unworthy of an intelligent agent not to be consciously aware that the action is of a class which, if practiced generally, would be greatly injurious, and that is for the ground of the obligation to abstain from it. Mill also argues that it's sometimes right to violate general ethical rules. Justice is a name for certain moral requirements, which, regarded collectively, stand higher in the scale of social utility, and are therefore of more paramount obligation than any others, though particular cases may occur in which some other social duty is so important as to overrule any of the general maxims of justice. Thus, to save a life, it may not only be allowable, but a duty to steal or take by force the necessary food or medicine, or to kidnap and compel to officiate the only qualified medical practitioner. So I think that's a good example of where absolutes are bad. You know, it is wrong to, for example, steal, but if you have to steal to save a life, the concept is that the moral good of saving that life is greater than the moral bad of stealing the thing, and therefore it is good. So yeah, then we have strong rule utilitarianism gives a utilitarian account for the claim that moral rules should be obeyed at all times and all places. SRU does not deteriorate into active utilitarianism like weak rule utilitarianism, but it shares weaknesses with similarly absolutist moral stances, notably deontological ones. A scenario or thought experiment used to clarify this problem when attributed to Immanuel Kant posits both: 1, you know the location of some persons; 2, a murderer asks you about the location in order to go and kill them. The moral convention is that lying is wrong, so that the strong rule utilitarian says you should reveal their location. A more sophisticated SRU response is that 1, the above scenario is very improbable; 2, in the majority of situations, telling the truth leads to more trust and happiness; and 3, if applied universally, a la Kant's categorical imperative, the rule against lying would create net utility. This position is most notably argued by some dude in an essay he wrote. So, yeah, the idea that, first off, obviously this is a bullshit example, intended to be a bullshit example, but strong rule utilitarianism, if you say that rules are absolute, if they are moral, then they are absolute, then you fail when you come into a situation like this where two rules conflict. The rule of being honest and the rule of protecting other people. And then we have weak rule utilitarianism, attempts to handle strong rule utilitarian counterexamples as legitimate exceptions. One such response is two-level utilitarianism. More systematic WRUs attempt to create sub-rules to handle the exceptions. But as David Lyons and others have argued, this will necessarily tend to collapse into act utilitarianism. Rules will require as many sub-rules as there are exceptions. Thus, many exceptions will make the more sophisticated rule computationally intractable. Rational agents will then sacrifice that intractability by seeking out outcomes that produce the minimum utility, or the maximum utility. So that contrasts with act utilitarianism. I won't go all the way through this. It's a theory of ethics that states that a person's act is morally right, or if and only if it produces the best possible results in that specific situation. Classic utilitarians, including Jeremy Bartham, John Stuart Mill, and Henry Sidgwick, define happiness as pleasure and the absence of pain. So I just thought that was kind of a fascinating thing, and that's why I brought it up. So essentially, I totally agree with you. I am Canadian. The idea of absolutes is ridiculous. We do not live in a world where absolutes work. If we, and where we've had conversations before, like the Nazi thing, or like the free speech and what are the limits of free speech, things like that, you cannot effectively come up with this right here, this little sentence or paragraph or whatever is a complete and true moral law. You can come up with this little thing right here is a pretty decent guidebook for most circumstances. And I think that's the thing that we try to accomplish from a legislative perspective when we create laws, or at least the hope is that what we're doing is we're trying to create laws that most benefit the majority of people, and that B are hopefully at least somewhat open to interpretation in particular circumstances. Unfortunately, the reality is we're shit at that, and we have a nasty habit of getting really hung up on the absolutes of things. I was watching today, I watched Steve Hofstetter talk about gun control. He's, gun control solved in 3 minutes. I'll play that afterwards. It'll be fun. But it's a really good joke, and it's based on the idea that we all You know, you can love guns all you want, and you can defend the Second Amendment all you want, but, you know, you have to care about all of the amendments equally if you're going to do that. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I love the people who are absolutist. You know, people who are absolute about communism are a good example. I mentioned Hawes earlier, and his stances are so comedic to me because they literally are someone else has thought up a thing, and I like that thing, so I'm just going to believe that whether it's true or not. You know, morality is flexible and has to be flexible. The Bible didn't define it, especially as I was talking about earlier, if you factor in the fact that, you know, the morality in the Bible says that God can overrule your consent. It's a weird thing. What am I looking at here? Yeah, same, same. My brain just stopped. Sorry. That's okay. Just making sure my kid didn't need anything. So I just think that it's an important thing to consider, and which I had not really thought through. Where does, you know, where do our values and ethics come from, and how do we define things like right and wrong? And for me, like I say, I if you think about social animals, there is, at least to some degree, a sense of a shared set of values and behaviors. If you are a gazelle on the Serengeti, you might personally, if you are, for example, the fastest dang gazelle, you might personally do just fine if you sacrifice the other members of your group. So let's just say you see that the wolf or the lion off in the distance, and you're like, haha, a lion. You know, yeah, I could run from the lion, or I could just stay on the other side of the pack from the lion, and the weaker people are going to get killed, but the lion is no longer hungry, and therefore I'm safe, at least for a time. And I don't have to waste the energy, right? That's a perfectly reasonable frame of putting two and two together, but it doesn't benefit the whole. And so instead, social species do things like when one sees a lion, they go, hey dudes, heads up, fucking lion over there. The gazelle is looking out for itself and sacrificing the herd, immoral as hell. No, I don't think that's the case at all, because they do things like raising the alarm when they see lions or what have you. They also pack together, so they can make as narrow a target, and hopefully, you know, if the lion attacks, they all fucking run, and hopefully they survive. So an individual can make different moral judgments than the herd. No, I don't think that's the case. I.e., the minority can be moral. Well, ultimately, I mean, yes, the minority can be moral, but that would involve, for example, Nazis. Can you show me an example of how Nazism could be considered moral? Because I feel like that's a bit of a hard stretch. And what I'm saying, I didn't say Nazism, I said Nazis. Okay. So an individual Nazi could be moral. I'll give you an example. If I understand correctly from having watched a movie a long time ago, Schindler, if I'm not mistaken, was a member of the Nazi Party. So yes, he would have been, in that sense, a Nazi, and who behaved in moral fashion. Pick a path, philosophy, or behaviors. Let's... I don't know what you mean. Do you mean that I'm straying between the two? Because I think the philosophy is how we understand the decisions we make around our behaviors. That would be my take on it. And I think the philosophy is just as important as the behaviors. And the purpose of the philosophy is to try and understand and come up with a framework for making decisions about our behaviors. And again, it's probably worth noting, I don't even believe in free will, so all of this is kind of silly. Switching context and arguing individual examples and raising it to the ism. Oh, I may very well be doing that. So I'll deal with the hypothetical you presented. Is there such a thing as a Nazi who was a good person? And we're talking about an individual person, and the example I gave was Schindler. Again, I'm not by any means an expert on the life of Schindler. I don't even remember if his first name, it's probably Joseph, but I could be wrong. If morality is relative and not absolute, the judgment that Nazism is bad can be yes, while the Nazi can be a good person, whereas the morality lesson. Oh, it's not leading anywhere. I'm not coming to a point. I was just talking. If we need a point, you're probably looking at the wrong streamer. I guess my point was it's worth exploring and understanding, why we make these decisions. Democracy is better than fascism, yet democracies have practiced horrible morality, for example, colonialism. Yep, absolutely. I would argue that colonialism is definitely an evil and probably more akin to fascism than it wants to necessarily believe. You can ignore me, Jen. No, I'm good. So did I answer your question? Did I give you the with the example of Schindler? Absolutely, somebody can be a good person and subscribe to bad ideals. The reality is that I would argue that most white supremacists are not bad people at their core. They're just confused and twisted by an ideology that leads them down the wrong path and that chips away at their own sense of what's moral and what's right. Bad ideology uses Schindler after the fact. I don't know what you mean by that. Bad idea. During fascism in Germany, he'd have been killed. No, because he was during fascism in Germany. Again, maybe I'm not sure about the whole story, but my understanding of things is that he basically was a member of the German world. He was a business owner during the Third Reich, and did what he could to. If they'd caught him out, they'd have killed him. Yes, absolutely, because Nazism, the ism, is not utilitarian. It is very fascist and destructive, and he would have been seen as showing weakness. He would have been seen as being treasonous because he was aiding and abetting the enemy. So yeah, absolutely, if they'd have caught him, they'd have killed him. But he was an example. Ultimately, if your question is, can someone hold Nazi ideology and be a good person, I don't think they can. Because inherently, the goals of Nazism are incompatible with goodness. And so, an individual who subscribes to Nazism probably can't be a good person. Might be able to do good acts and good deeds, but by and large, I mean, like, we can split hairs on what if he helps enough women cross the street to, justify doing this or whatever. And that's the problem with the philosophy of, any of this is trying to come up with some kind of a practical equation to apply, because that doesn't exist. But I think the answer ultimately is, if you are doing your best to put as much good into the world as you can, then you kind of can't be a Nazi. You might think you're doing that because you have a twisted view of what's right in the world, or a view that says that the the people that you're hurting aren't even people, so it doesn't matter. But I would argue that if you were genociding puppies, you're still a monster. It's, you know, moral conversations are, I think they're fascinating, and I think they're interesting. And I think it's an important thing for us to understand about ourselves and where our own morality lies and what drives it, because we often will, if we don't think about things, we will act in our own self-interests, and sometimes to the detriment of others or many others, and still feel that we are moral people. So, for example, there are people who are good Christian folk. They do good Christian folk things. They go to church. They tip Jesus every time he serves them on a cracker. Good, kind people. But then they go to their day job, and where they run mega corporation, and rip off their employees, steal labor, steal their wages. Pardon me. Engage in all of the sleight of hand that leads to like global warming and shit. Promote negative ideas like, oh, maybe global warming isn't really real. This kind of stuff. Those may be good people, but looking at the and again, now I guess we're more in the act utilitarian perspective. The actions they have taken have led to a far greater amount of evil than the good that they've created. What is this global warming you speak of? I know, it's weird. I giggle because, so I am Canadian and I used to work for the same company once upon a time in the oil and gas sphere. Yeah, Christian, therefore good. And I don't disagree that, there are strong moral teachings of goodness inside the Bible, but they're almost accidental. Like, there's just as much negative in the Bible that gets promoted as good. It's totally immoral to come on the ground instead of inside a lady woo woo, but it's perfectly okay to murder, in the name of God's righteous anger. I was talking earlier about this video that I saw, and they were singing their Christian contemporary rock songs, and literally the songs were like, Jesus, please send your fucking hellfire down upon us, roast this whole planet, murder all of us so that we can finally live in your love and the evil people can get just fucking ruined. And I'm like, I don't know if you guys know the same Jesus that I met when I was a kid, but I don't feel like he might like you so much. The example of the Westbros comes up. Those are people who believe very strongly that they're doing exactly what God wants them to do. And it's easy to go, well, no, you're not. You're a fucking monster. But they think they are. And there's some reason to be like, maybe... that's a creepy thing. My own experience with faith is very different than a lot of people's. I harbor a grudge towards being raised in a religious tradition, but only because I feel like, the foundation of my original morality was based on lies. And when you look at the actual morality of things like the Ten Commandments, you go, wow, that's neat. Didn't think up rape. But, rape wouldn't have been a big deal. It just was a thing. She were asking for it. There's no condemnation of pedophilia. There's no condemnation of, you're not allowed to steal. But Christians seem to be pretty okay with wage theft. A little bit of a thing. I don't know. I'm rambly today. I'm not very focused today, I have to say. I don't know, maybe I didn't get a good sleep. But I have coffee, and coffee's good. I think I remember, and I've brought this up a million times, so you want to be a Christian or a moral relativist pamphlet that my buddy had to teach when he was a substitute teacher in a Catholic school. Morals are so much more complicated than a handout or a quick lecture by a junior high school teacher or whatever. And I think that we don't do a service when we don't think about them and we don't talk about them. I actually think it's a good thing to consider. It's easy to justify things, especially post hoc, right? We can always post hoc justify the fuck out of stuff. But thinking about things and deciding what to do before we act, we should have a reasonable framework. And you can't know everything. This is part of the example of punching a Nazi. I can't know if I punch a Nazi if he's going to become angry and go buy a nuclear weapon and genocide all of my city. That would be a net bad from my action. I would argue that that's probably not the thing that caused him to do that, but the point raised is a valid one. I can't know all of the answers until after the dust has settled, or in this case, the radiation cloud has moved on. So we have to base it on a certain amount of assumption, a certain amount of interpretation of the world around us, and things like that. And that's why I brought up the past history of white supremacists. So, the punk rock world that I live in, the white supremacists started to show up once upon a time. They always will, especially in any kind of fringe culture, particularly one that has any kind of anti-government vibe to it. They will be there. And the punks, at least here in my hometown, the punks stood up and were like, you need to get the fuck out of here. And there were fights, because the Nazis are a problem. And if you let them in, they will continue to come in, and they will only get worse. And so by constantly standing up and fighting them, and eventually, they were pushed out of that scene. And as a result, A, the scene was safer. B, their Nazi bullshit didn't get a chance to propagate, at least to any of the disaffected youths with the funny hair, and therefore net good. So this was an example of often violent altercations occurring with net positive outcomes. And this is why I'm okay with the idea of punching a Nazi. I recognize that not everybody is, and not everybody has to be. But for me, from the experience of myself and the people in my musical community, it worked. It was a net benefit. That would have been impossible to know for certain at the time, but so also is not punching a Nazi. And I'll give you the example. I read a story about a person went to a bar, and they're in this bar, new bar they haven't been to before, and some guy comes in and sits down next to them, and the bartender comes over, hey, what can I get you? And he looks and he's like, you need to get the fuck out of here. And the guy had been really polite, he'd been really kind, he'd been very respectful, and the person telling the story looked down and noticed that he had like a little tiny swastika button. And guy was like, yeah, no, I get it, totally understand, have a good day, sir, and left without incident. And the person questioned the bartender and was like, was that just because of his little lapel pin? And the bartender's like, yep. if you, get fooled by, oh, he was very nice, he was very kind, and he didn't act badly at all. In fact, he seemed like a downright pleasant, affable folk. Well, why not? The minute that you go down that road, you are engaging in what utilitarianism would call an immoral act, because the next time he comes, he brings a friend. And the next time he comes, he brings a couple of friends. And the next time they come, they start to be a problem. Give an inch and they'll take a mile. Exactly. And that's the thing, is they don't walk into a place and start beating people up. If it's a new bar that they want to hang out at. That's not how they roll. What they do is they come in and they act very gentlemanly. And they go, yeah, like we're ideologically opposed, but at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all people, and can't we all just get along? And then 3 weeks later, that's when they're a problem. And by then, they've got their hooks in. And by then, it's, like now you have a problem on your hands. And this is the thing. So yeah, I am okay with punching Nazis if it serves the utility benefit of making them not promote their Nazism. I'll tell you, I am Canadian. I'm having a bitch of a time today. Just staying focused. What do you think? Am I just annoyingly rambling? You're the only person watching, I'm pretty sure. So it's just you and me, bud. You know what? There was a thing that I was going to start doing today. It actually seems like a particularly good time to do it, because I don't want to end the stream yet, even though I feel like I'm not nailing it. But this will be something that I will have to take on in many parts, because there's a lot going on here, and there's more than I can cover in any one day. But I think it's worth starting. So we're going to do that. You switch over to this and go here and paste. We're going to talk about the Indian Act. Specifically, we're going to read the contents of the Indian Act. Now, we're not going to read the entire thing, because there's a lot, especially at the beginning, there's a lot of definitions that are not that terribly engaging. Basically, we talk about definitions. There's a couple that I would point out. Band means a body of Indians for whose use and benefit in common lands the legal title to which is vested in Her Majesty's in Her Majesty have been set apart before, on, or after September 4th, 1951, for whose use and benefit in common moneys are held by Her Majesty or declared by the governor in council to be a band for the purposes of this act. So that's what a band means. Band list is essentially a list of people that are part of the band. Child, includes a legally adopted child and a child adopted in accordance with Indian custom. Common law partner in relation to an individual means a person who's cohabiting with the individual in a conjugal relationship, having so cohabited for a period of at least 1 year. Common law is an interesting thing because the numbers are always different. Some government agencies will see it as 6 months, others will see it as over a year, some will see it of 1 year. It's just kind of a thing that happens. Council of the Band. This is an interesting one because this is where this sort of comes from, and I think it's explained later. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but in the case of a band to which Section 74 applies, the council established pursuant to that section. In the case of a band that is named in the schedule to the First Nations Elections Act, the council's elected or in office in accordance with the Act. In the case of a band whose name has been removed from the schedule to the First Nations elected of the Act in accordance with Section 42 of that Act, the council elected or an official or in office in accordance with the Community Election Code referred to in that section, or in the case of any other band, the council chosen according to the custom of the band, or if there is no council, the chief of the band chosen according to the custom of the band. So point D there does not apply to many bands. As a general rule, my understanding is whatever this Section 74, which I think we will get to, covers the majority of bands, and then we have the First Nations Election Act, and anything that's been removed from the schedule to the First Nations Election Act in accordance with Section 42 of that Act. I think these three kind of ended up defining almost all of the bands in Canada. So what that essentially meant was and we've talked about this before, the creation of the elected chiefs and council. Indigenous groups had always had hereditary chiefs, or not necessarily all of them, but I think the majority of them had hereditary chiefs who were viewed by the people of the band as being the ones that make the decisions for the band. And when the Indian Act was passed, there was this implication that you have to elect the chiefs and council. And that was in direct conflict with the idea of a hereditary chief. And they sort of made agreements that, okay, in acts with interacting with the government, the chiefs and council can do that, but the hereditary chiefs will continue to make the decisions on behalf of the band. And thereby hangs the problem, because now you have two people who are official decision makers. Department refers to the Department of Indigenous Services. Designated land means a tract of land or any interest therein, the legal title to which remains vested in Her Majesty, and in which the band for whose use and benefit it was set apart as a reserve has otherwise than absolutely released or surrendered its rights or interests, whether before or after the coming into force of this definition. So, if I'm reading this correctly, and I may not be because I don't speak legal, what this refers to is ceded lands. So they are lands that the legal title remains vested with Her Majesty, and in which the band for whose use and benefit it was set apart as a reserve has otherwise than absolutely released or surrendered its rights or interests. So I believe this specific designated lands refers to what we would call ceded lands, lands that were, whether intentionally or otherwise, ceded to the Queen in the signing of the various treaties. Elector, a person is registered on a band list, is full age of 18 years, and is not disqualified from voting at band elections. Estate includes real and personal property of any interest in that land. Indian means a person who, pursuant to this act, is registered as an Indian or is entitled to be registered as an Indian. Indian monies mean all monies collected, received, or held by Her Majesty for the use and benefit of Indians or bands. The Indian Register means the register of persons that is maintained under Section 5. Intoxicant includes alcohol, alcoholic, spirituous, vinous, fermented malt, or other intoxicating liquor, or combination of liquors and mixed liquor, a part of which is spiritus, vinous, fermented or otherwise intoxicating, and all drinks, drinkable liquids, preparations, or mixtures capable of human consumption that are intoxicating. This is actually a thing that is called out in the Act. There's a specific section on that it touches on intoxicants, apparently. We'll see what that looks like. Member of a band means a person whose name appears on a band list, who is entitled to have his name appear on a band list. Mentally incompetent Indian. We actually have a definition in Canadian law of a mentally incompetent Indian. Means an Indian who, pursuant to the laws of the province in which he resides, has been found to be mentally defective or incompetent for the purpose of any laws of that province, providing for the administration of estates of mentally defective or incompetent persons. This is fascinating to me, this little spot here, because this is still Canadian law. The Indian Act is still Canadian law, and therefore there is a legal Canadian definition for a mentally incompetent Indian. That's not weird. Minister is the Minister of Indigenous Service. Registered means registered as an Indian in the Indian Register. Registrar means the office in the department who's in charge of the Indian Register and the band list maintained in the department. Reserved means a tract of land, the legal title to which is vested in Her Majesty, that has been set apart by Her Majesty for use and benefit of a band, and, except in a bunch of stuff, includes designated lands. The superintendent includes a commissioner. I don't need to go through. Surrendered lands means a reserve or part of a reserve or any interest therein, the legal title to which remains vested in Her Majesty, that has been released or surrendered by the band for whose use and benefit it was set apart. So in other words, surrendered land specifically refers to we've got a treaty, we've got a certain amount of treaty land, and the band has said this chunk we're going to just give back to you. I don't know how likely that is, and I would imagine it's probably not quite so simple a distinction as just we surrendered our lands. I see, I don't think there is anything in the act saying ceded, is there? No, I don't think that it says ceded. I think it talks about surrendered, or in the case of earlier we were talking about designated lands. The idea is that it's already been ceded because the legal title to which remains vested in Her Majesty. So it's not that we're talking about this isn't the act of ceding the lands. That happened with the treaties. Reserves for Indigenous alone doesn't mean rest is ceded except in a treaty. No, but the thing is that the ceding of the lands, so for example, I know that the Wet'suwet'en never ceded their lands, and there is no treaty that says this is ceded territory. Versus Treaty 7, where I live, it specifically in the treaty states that the indigenous people were ceding the territory. Now, they didn't have a sense of what the fuck that meant. Those were not words that were in their vocabulary, but the Canadians felt pretty okay stealing it. Trying to figure out the relationship of land versus the status of the person may just be too confused. Yeah. This is not going to get better, I imagine. The Indian Act should be difficult. So yeah, surrendered lands. Survivor in relation to a deceased individual means their surviving spouse or common law partner. And I don't think we. Unless the context otherwise requires on this or this act otherwise provides, a power conferred on a band shall be deemed not to be exercised unless it is exercised pursuant to the consent of a majority of the electors of the band, and a power conferred on the council of a band shall be deemed not to be exercised unless it is exercised pursuant to the consent of a majority of the councillors of the band present at a meeting of the city council the council duly convened. So this is essentially saying that anything that this act gives you cannot be done unless you have a majority of your elected chiefs and council representing the majority of the electors agreeing. So, this is sort of enshrined democracy. So the application of the act, let's see if this is interesting. A reference in this act to an Indian does not include any person of the race of Aboriginals commonly referred to as Inuit. Act may be declared inapplicable. The governor and council may be, by proclamation, declare that this act or any portion thereof, except sections 5 to 14.3 or sections 37 to 41, shall not apply to any Indians or any group or band of Indians, or any reserve or any surrendered lands or any part thereof, and may, by proclamation, revoke any such declaration. So that's a cool get out of jail free card. Literally, the governor and council can just be like, nope, they don't count. They're not a band. And then the act doesn't apply to them anymore. I don't know why that would be there, but okay. Authority confirmed for certain cases. For greater certainty and without restricting the generality of subsection 2, the governor and council shall be deemed to have had the authority to make any declaration under subsection 2 that the governor and council has made in respect of section 11, 12, or 14, or any provision thereof, as each section or provision read immediately prior to. This is why reading these things is so confusing. It's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Essentially, For a greater certainty and without restricting the generality of this whole thing with the Governor General making proclamations to remove or add bans, shall be deemed to have the authority to make any declaration under that subsection. Yeah, I don't get it. Certain sections inapplicable to Indians living off reserve, sections 114 to 117, and unless the minister otherwise orders, sections 42 to 52, do not apply to or in respect of any Indian who does not ordinarily reside on a reserve or on lands belonging to Her Majesty in right of Canada or a province. This is an interesting thing because it basically, and I believe intentionally, makes it problematic for people. They lose protections if they don't live on the reserve. And therefore, we keep the Indigenous people in their reserve. It's a real sketch to me that the minute that you step off, or not the minute you step off, but the minute that you are no longer ordinarily residing on the reserve, that you lose a bunch of these rights. And we'll see what they are. Provisions that apply to all members. A reference to an Indian in any of the following provisions shall be deemed to include a reference to any person whose name is entered in a banned list and who's entitled to have entered it therein. The definitions banned: Indian money is a mentally incompetent Indian in section 2. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. Definition and registration of Indians. There shall be maintained in the department an Indian register in which shall be recorded the name of every person who's entitled to be registered as an Indian under this act. That I find creepy. I don't know if that's creepy or not. It just seems weird, right? We don't have a honky register. We just have an Indian register. The names in the Indian register immediately prior to April 17th shall constitute the Indian register on April 17th. So there was already an Indian register. This act was put in place to resolve some of the challenges with people who are not able to claim themselves as being Indians on the register prior. So this is that thing we were talking about a couple weeks ago with, if your maternal grandmother was Indigenous or whatever the particular nuances were. Like if your maternal grandfather was Indigenous, you're fine. If your maternal grandmother was Indigenous, well, then you don't get to be on the act. This was supposed to resolve some of that. The registrar may at any time add or delete from the Indian register the name of any person who, in accordance with this act, is entitled or not entitled, as the case may be, to have his name included in the Indian register. The register shall indicate the date on which each name was added thereto and deleted therefrom. The name of a person who's entitled to be registered and is not required to be recorded in the Indian register unless an application. So this is all very basic stuff. Unknown or unstated parentage. If a parent, grandparent, or other ancestor of a person in respect of whom an application is made is unknown, or is unstated on a birth certificate, that if the parent, grandparent, or other ancestor were named on it would help to establish the person's entitlement to be registered, the registrar shall, without being required to establish the identity of that parent, grandparent, or other ancestor, determine, after considering all the relevant evidence, whether the parent, grandparent, or other ancestor is, was, or would have been entitled to registration in making the determination. The registrar shall rely on any credible evidence that is presented by the applicant in support of the application, or that the registrar otherwise has knowledge of, and shall draw from it every reasonable inference in favor of the person in respect of whom the application is made. This is one of those tricky things that I think they erred on the side of way too far on the side of caution. The only thing weird here is we defined Indian, which is in Indigenous terms. But that was again, this was passed in, when, not that terribly long ago. Posting the link? Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to do so. Let me just... Why? Oh, it's because I have my finger on the wrong thing. All right. Link is posted. There you go. Yeah, so you have to have some kind of a rule that says if you can't prove that you belong on this, then you present your evidence and takes your chances. The problem is that we were not terribly good at doing this sort of respectfully, and a lot of the people who had been struggling to prove that they had a right to be on this list didn't have things like your grandparents' birth certificate or what have you to draw from. So credible evidence was hard to come by. The interpretation I have is that this was an attempt to resolve some of the issues they had, but I think that it didn't really resolve a lot of them. For greater certainty, if the identity of a parent, guardian, or grandparent or other ancestor of an applicant is unknown or unstated on a birth certificate, there's no presumption that this parent, grandparent, or other ancestor was not, or would not have been entitled to be registered. So that's basically saying, like, if you're going and saying my grandparent was John and I don't have a means of proving that, then you can't presuppose that John wouldn't have been entitled. However, if I say it's John, the registrar has to essentially make that decision. And if the registrar doesn't feel like it, they can't presume the negative, but they can decide the negative. Persons entitled to be registered, this is basically a series of conditions, and it's really dry, and I don't understand. So there's a bunch of stuff that was repealed in 2017, and essentially this is the criterion on which persons can be registered. And I guarantee you, I'm not reading this because it would be boring and not something that I can completely, I won't wrap my head around it properly. When I last checked, there is no indigenous birth certificate system. 6 birth certificate records, please, for fuck's sakes. Yes. And not only that, but birth certificates are, they're not exactly, like the new version of the birth certificate is perhaps a little bit better because they are made of the same stuff that our money is made out of, so it's a little more resilient. And they're hologrammy, so you can, avoid fraud and all that kind of stuff. But realistically, if we're talking about like, hey, it's 1951, prove that your grandfather is who you say he is by let's see your grandfather's birth certificate. You probably don't have that, even if it was issued at some point. A person who's entitled to be registered under both. Okay, that's more on the registration. So I'm just going to go to the next page because this is all stuff that's, if you are left-handed, but you also smell of elderberries, that kind of thing. Not entitled to be registered, a person who was registered under paragraph 11.1 as it read immediately prior to April 17th or any, okay, that's more stuff I'm not going to understand. So let's go to band lists. So there shall be maintained in accordance with this act for each band a band list in which shall be entered the name of every person who was a member of that band. Again, I find that real sketchy, but I suppose if you're providing benefits, you have to have some kind of method for determining whether the person should receive those benefits. But I find the idea, like, I guarantee you, if they said, hey, all you white folks, we're going to have a list of all of you, people would just not be okay with that. Until such time as a band assumes control of its band list, which is weird. The band list of that band shall be maintained in the department by the registrar. The names in a band list of a band immediately prior to blah, blah, blah shall constitute the band list of that band. In other words, no one is directly losing, we just copy the band list from old to new, and that's our new list, and then we can add to it, theoretically. Registrar may at any time add or delete to the band list. Maintain that it shall indicate the date on which each name was added thereto and removed. The name of a person who is entitled to have his name entered in the band list. Maintain. So essentially, this whole section is very much similar to the last one. A band may assume control of its own membership if it establishes membership rules for itself in writing in accordance with this section, and if, after the band has given appropriate notice of its intention to assume control of its own membership, a majority of the electors of the band gives its consent to the band's control of its own membership. So that at least is kind of, better. A band may, pursuant to the consent of a majority of the electors of the band, after it has given appropriate notice of its intention to do so, establish membership rules for itself, and provide for a mechanism for reviewing decisions on membership. So I feel like that's probably not all that bad. This is basically saying, if a band decides they want to take over, they have the ability to do so. We just want to know what their mechanism for reviewing decisions on membership is. So I don't think that's a terrible thing. Where the council of a band makes a bylaw under paragraph 81, bringing this subsection into effect in respect of the band, the consents required under subsections 1 and 2 shall be given by a majority of the members of the band who are of full age of 18 years of age. So again, this has to be democratically decided upon. And again, that wasn't how they ran. They had hereditary chiefs who made these decisions and who, had wielded that power. So this is sort of baking into the legislation this idea that, you have hereditary chiefs, but you're going to vote on everything because we're a democracy and therefore you are too. I think that's wrong. I'm going to pause there and jump outside for 7 minutes-ish. I will be right back, but I need a break, and that's what I'm going to do. So I will press play, and I will be back momentarily. Okay. I am back. And we will continue to go through this for a little bit longer, and then I'll do my humiliations. So, acquired rights. Membership rules established by a band under this section may not be deprived any person who had the right to have his name entered in the band list for that band immediately prior to the time the rules were established of the right to have his name so entered by reason only of a situation that existed or an action that was taken before the rules came into force. I think essentially that says that unless there is good cause, if you were on the band list before, you're on the band list now. Kind of goes in the face of that whole section where they were like, yeah, the governor can just decide. I guess that was more, yeah, maybe I'm wrong on that. Okay. For greater certainty, subsection 4, which is the acquired rights thing, applies in respect of a person who was entitled to have his name entered in the band list under paragraph 11(1)(c) immediately before the band assumed control of the band list, if that person does not subsequently cease to be entitled to have his name entered in the band list. So in other words, you can't, I guess actually that does make sense. You can't make a rule that says, no homers as part of your thing. And then when you take over the band list, go, haha, but no homers. So Homer Jenkins, you no longer have ability to be on the band list if in the situation where a band is taking over the ownership of the list. Where the conditions set out in subsection 1 have been met with respect to a band, the council of the band shall forthwith give notice to the minister in writing that the band is assuming control of its own. Okay, fine. Notice to band and copy of the band list. On receipt of notice from the council, the minister shall, if they've been met, give notice to the band that it has control and direct the registrar to provide the band with a copy. Okay, so that's fine. Effective date of band membership's rules. So the band has to document the date that the rules, membership rules, are established and go into effect. A band shall maintain its own band list from the date on which a copy of the band list is received by the band under paragraph 7 and subject to section 13.2. The department shall have no further responsibility with respect to the band list from that date. And a band may add or remove people in accordance with the membership rules of the band, as the case may be. A band list maintained by a band shall indicate the date on which, yeah, okay. Membership rules for departmental band list. So, commencing April 17th, a person is entitled to have his name on the band list maintained. I think this is all kind of a reiteration of what we were talking about. Commencing on the day that is 2 years after the day that an act entitled... Commencing on the day that is 2 years after the day that an act entitled An Act to Amend the Indian Act introduced in the House of Commons on February 28, 1985 is assented to, or on such earlier day as may be agreed to under section 13.1, where a band does not have control of its band list under the act, a person is entitled to have his name entered in the band list maintained in the department for the band. If that person is entitled to be registered and cease to be a member of that band by reason of the circumstances set out in the paragraph, or if the person is entitled to be registered in the paragraph, and a parent referred to in that provision is entitled to have his name entered in the band list if no longer living was at the time of death entitled to have his name. Okay, so this is basically saying, I think this is also to do with that thing about the people who were not on the band list but should have been, and we were trying to, at least in theory, resolve that. Deeming provision for the purposes of paragraph 1 and subsection 2, a person whose name was omitted or deleted from the Indian register or band list in the circumstances set out in paragraph 6, and who was no longer living on the first day of which the person would otherwise be entitled to have the person's name entered in the band list of the band which the person ceased to be a member of, is deemed to be entitled. So if the person wasn't on the list, should have been on the list, and is now dead, they are entitled... person who would have been entitled to be registered under paragraph 6 had they been living on the day which the paragraph came into force, and who would otherwise have been entitled on that day have their name entered in the band list, is deemed to be entitled to have their name so entered, and the parent or is deemed in the subsection entitled to have the parent's name entered. So essentially, if I understand these 3 points correctly, this is where we've made our changes to more allow people to be on the list. This would be relating to things like the maternal grandfather, grandmother issue. Even if the person's dead, they get to have their name on the list. A person is entitled to have their name in the banned list that is maintained by the department if, the same thing, but as opposed to being maintained by the band, this is being maintained by the department. Where a band amalgamates or is divided. Where a band amalgamates with another band or is divided so as to constitute new bands, any person who would otherwise have been entitled to have his name entered in the band list of that band under this section is entitled to have his name entered into the band list of the amalgamated band or the new band to which the person has the closest family ties, as the case may be. So if we are combining two bands into one, then everyone who was on the band list of one of those two is now on the band list of the new one. And if we are splitting them, then it's where your closest family ties are. Family ties being a little bit weird, I would suggest that, if it sort of presents the Romeo and Juliet scenario where if someone has essentially gone from, here's their family within the band and they're now over here and they're not together and they, why wouldn't you be considered a member of the new band over here instead of the whatever. I would have preferred this to be like, people can choose which band they belong to. Commencing on the day that is 2 years after the day that an act entitled an act to amend the Indian Act introduced by the House of blah blah blah. A person is entitled to be registered under Section 6, but is not entitled to have his name entered in the band list maintained by the department. Is a member of another band is entitled to have his name entered in the band list maintained in the department for a band if the council for admitting band consents. Okay, so if I say, hey, I want to have my name on this list over here, and the band consents, then, or the council of the band consents, then okay. Weird that would go to council, but, you have to have processes, I suppose. Notwithstanding Sections 11 and 12, no person is entitled to have his name entered at the same time in more than one band list maintained in the department. I get that. A band may at any time prior to the day that is 2 years, blah, blah, blah. A band may at any time prior to the day after the February 28th, 1985, decide to leave its control of its band list with the department if a majority of the electors of the band give it consent to that decision. So if you have a new band, you can decide whether or not you want the list to be controlled by the department. Okay. When a band decides to leave the control of its band list with the department under subsection 1, the council of the band shall forthwith give notice to the administrator in case subsequent band control. Return of control to the department. Transfer of responsibility to the department. Entitlement retained. A person is entitled to have his name entered in a band list maintained in the department pursuant to section 13.2. If that person was entitled to have his name entered, and his name was entered in the band list immediately before a copy was provided to the minister under section 11. Whether or not that person is also entitled to have his name entered in the band list under section 11. Okay. Copy of band list provided to council. List of additions and deletions. List to be posted to the council of each band shall forthwith, on receiving a copy of the band list, or a list of additions to and deletions from its band list under subsection 2, post the copy or the list, as the case may be, in a conspicuous place on the reserve of the band. That seems a little odd, too, that you would have that posted somewhere, but again, I don't understand any of this. The registrar shall on inquiry from any person who believes that he or any other person he represents is entitled to have his name included in the Indian register or band list maintained in the department, indicate that the person making the inquiry whether or not the name is included therein. A protest may be made in respect of the inclusion or addition of the name of a person in, or of the omission or deletion of the name of a person from the Indian register or a band list maintained in the department within 3 years after the inclusion or addition or omission or deletion, as the case may be, by notice in writing to the registrar containing a brief statement of the grounds therefor. So, yeah, that makes sense. If someone is added, removed, or overlooked, you can provide some like, hey, this person should be on there, or this person shouldn't be on there. which presumably helps prevent the sneaky honkies from getting on the Indian register or the banned list. Protest in respect of the banned list. A protest may be made under the section of a band by the council of the band, any member of the band or the person in respect of whose name the protest is being made, or that person's representative. Protest may be made under the section in respect to the Indian register by the same thing. The onus of establishing the grounds of a protest under the section lies on the person making the protest. Makes sense. Where a protest is made to the registrar under the section, the registrar shall cause an investigation to be made into the matter and render a decision. For the purpose of this section, the registrar may receive such evidence on oath, on affidavit, or in any other manner, whether or not admissible in a court of law, as the registrant, in his discretion, seems fit to justify. So I guess because, like if there was a scenario where somebody said Joe shouldn't be on the list, there may not be documentation that assesses whether or not Joe should be on the list, but the fact that Joe, that people go, well, Joe is this, that, or the other, can be just at the discretion of the registrar, sort of taken into account. And the registrar's decision is final. Within 6 months, after the decision on the protest, council of the band, the person by whom the protest was made, or the person in respect of whose name of the protest was made, blah, 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 may, by notice in writing, appeal the decision to a court referred to in subsection 5. So if you get ousted from the band list and you feel like it was done in error, you can still, within 6 months, argue it. And copy of notice of appeal to the registrar. And the receipt of a copy of notice of appeal under subsection 1, the registrar shall forthwith file with the court a copy of the decision being appealed, together with all the documentary evidence considered in arriving at that decision, and any recording or transcript of any oral presentation. So basically, if somebody says I protest this, the registrar has to provide all the information to the court. The court may affirm, vary, or reverse the decision, or refer the subject matter of the appeal back to the registrar. Wouldn't it be nice if that was instead going to the band? Whatever. An appeal may be heard under this section in the province of Quebec before the Superior Court for the district in which the band is. Okay, this is just going to be what courts will hear the thing. So in Alberta, it would be the Court of Queen's Bench. Payments in respect of persons ceasing to be band members, where prior to September 4th, any woman became entitled under Section 14 of the Indian Act, Chapter 98 of the Revised Statutes of Canada, or any prior provisions to the like effect, to share in the distribution of annuities, interest monies, or rents. The minister may, in lieu thereof, pay to that woman out of the monies of the band an amount equal to 10 times the average annual amounts of the payments made to her during the 10 years last proceedings, or if they were paid for less than 10 years during the years they were paid. So if somebody is no longer seen to be a band member, essentially what this looks like, and it's weird that it would focus on women, but I don't understand why that would be the case. But the registrar can say, okay, well, you've been being paid for 7 years. We will pay you another 7 years, or maybe it's 10 years. I'm not sure 100% what that answer is, but you get paid for a certain amount of time, and it's a lump sum kind of thing. Transferred member's interest. A person who ceases to be a member of one band by reason of becoming a member of another band is not entitled to any interest in the lands or monies held by Her Majesty on behalf of the former band, but is entitled to the same interest in common in lands and monies held by Her Majesty on benefit of the latter band as other members of that band. What the fuck does that even mean? So if I leave one band because I'm becoming a member of another band, I don't own the lands or money, or I don't have an interest in the lands or monies held on behalf of the former band and is entitled to the same. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So if I switch bands, I don't start accruing like I have an interest in this band and an interest in this band. I get it. Again, this is like bringing economics into a system that probably didn't need to have that. Section on new bands. Reserves are to be held for use and the benefit of Indians. Subject to this act, reserves are held by Her Majesty for the use and benefit of the respective bands for which they were set apart. I'm so glad, by the way, that they're not saying Her Majesty's Indians anymore. Like, that was gross. And subject to the act and to the terms of any treaty or surrender, the governor in council may determine whether any purpose for which lands in a reserve are used or are to be used in the same use and benefit of the land. So the governor in council, is that the head of the chiefs in council? I'm just going to quickly, governor in council meaning. Ah, there we go. Governor of a British colony acting with the... Okay, so this would be like the governor... presumably like the whoever the appropriate governor of the province, for example, is, I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly. So we would have like lieutenant governor, for example. I think that's what they're talking about. Uses of reserves for schools, etc. The minister may authorize the use of lands in a reserve for the purpose of Indian schools, the administration of Indian affairs, Indian burial grounds, Indian health projects, or with the consent of the council of the band for any other purpose for the general welfare of the band, and may take any lands in a reserve required for those purposes, but where an individual Indian immediately prior to the taking was entitled to the possession of those lands, compensation for that use shall be paid to the Indian in such amount as may be agreed between the Indian and the minister, or failing agreement, as may be determined in such manner as the minister may direct. That's a bit weird. Essentially, let's just say Siksika needs to have a new school built. And they go, the governor can go, this is the land that you will use. Oh, and Steve lives on that land, so here, have some money, Steve. Get the fuck off of the land. I don't know. That seems a little sketch. A member of a band who resides on the reserve of the band may reside there with his dependent children or any children of whom the member has custody. So that would include adopted children. Or I guess just, non-biological children that the person has custody of. Okay. The minister may authorize surveys of reserves and the preparation of plans and reports with respect thereto, divide the whole or any portion of a reserve into lots or other subdivisions, and determine the location and direction of the construction of roads in a reserve. So essentially the minister... who's... I don't want to even go back and look at the definitions. Oh, the minister, it'd be the Minister of Indigenous Affairs, has the ability to decide to authorize surveys, divide the whole or any portion of the reserve into lots or other subdivisions, and determine the location and direction of the construction of roads. I don't know that I like that. Possession of lands and reserves. No Indian is lawfully in possession of land in a reserve unless, with the approval of the minister, possession of the land has been allowed to him by the council of the band. The minister may issue to an Indian who is lawfully in possession of land in a reserve a certificate, to be called a certificate of possession, as evidence of his right to possession of the land described therein. For the purpose of this act, any person who, on September 4th, held a valid and subsisting location ticket under the Indian Act 1980, or any statute relating to the same subject matter, shall be deemed to be lawfully in possession of the land which the location ticket relates, and to hold a certificate of possession with respect thereto. So if you had some evidence that said you owned a chunk of, or possessed, not owned, because the Queen owns it all, a chunk of the land prior to the Indian Act going in, then that's not going to get argued. Where possession of a land in a reserve has been allocated to an Indian and by the council of the band, the minister may, in his discretion, withhold his approval and may authorize the Indian to occupy the land temporarily, and may prescribe the conditions as to the use and settlement that are to be fulfilled by the Indian before the minister approves of the allotment. Well, that's fucking gross. So the council can be like, yeah, Steve wants to live there. And the minister can be like, no, You can live there temporarily, but get the fuck out. That I don't like. Certificate of occupation. Where the minister withholds approval pursuant to subsection 4, he shall issue a certificate of occupation to the Indian, and the certificate entitles the Indian or those claiming possession by devise or descent to occupy the land in respect of which it is issued for a period of 2 years from the date thereof. So if the minister says, no, you don't get to live in the place where you've already got agreement to live, you've got this 2 years where you can occupy. That seems like, maybe I don't understand, but that seems really shitty. The minister may extend the term of certificate of occupation for a further period not exceeding 2 years, and may, at the expiration of any period during the certificate of occupation is in force, approve the allotment by the council of the band and issue a certificate of possession, if in his opinion the conditions as to use and settlement have been fulfilled, or refuse approval of the allotment by the city or by the council of the band, and declare the land in respect for which the certificate of occupation was issued to be available for reallotment by the council of the band. That's the second point. The first one makes sense. The first one is like, if I've gone and given a certificate of occupation, and then I go, you know what, this works. Okay, fine. Let's get out a jail free card for the minister. The second part, the minister may extend the terms of a certificate, blah, blah, refuse approval of the allotment by the council of the band, and declare the land in respect of which the certificate of occupation was issued to be available for reallotment by the council. It's weird that that's in a section called extension and approval, because that's refusal. Oh, this is at the expiration of the period. Okay, so at the expiration of the period, I can say, nope, we're going to reuse the land for something else. Okay, I do get that. There shall be kept in the department a register to be known as the Reserve Land Register, which shall be entered particulars relating to the certificate of possession and certificates of occupation, and any other transactions respecting lands in a reserve. Where an Indian who is in possession of lands at the time they are included in a reserve made permanent improvements thereupon, that before that time he shall be deemed to be the lawful possession of those lands at the time they are included. So if the land didn't have a specific thing, but that person was like, hey, I built a house here, or I cut down all these trees and made a farm. Okay. An Indian who is lawfully removed from lands in reserve on which he has made permanent improvements may, if the minister so directs, be paid compensation in respect thereof in an amount to be determined by the minister, either from the person who goes into possession or from the funds of the band, at the discretion of the minister. So if I get lawfully removed from lands that I've made permanent improvements on, the minister can determine if he wants to pay me compensation in an amount that he determines. That seems weird. An Indian who is lawfully in possession of lands in a reserve may transfer to the band or another member of the band the right to possession of the land, but no transfer or agreement for the transfer of the right to possession of lands in a reserve is effective until it is approved by the minister. So if I say, you know what, son, I'm going to give you our family's land, the minister has to weigh in on that. That's whack. Yeah, how can I get that job? Yeah, seriously, like, I just want a job where all I do is make random decisions about whether or not people get to have their land anymore. It seems sketch. An Indian who ceases to be entitled to reside on a reserve may, within 6 months or such, transfer to the band or another member of the band the right to possession of any lands in the reserve which he has lawfully in possession. So if you lose the right to live on the reserve, you can either give it to another member of the band, or 6 months, or to the actual band. When right of possession reverts, an Indian does not dispose of his right of possession in accordance with subsection 1. So if he doesn't do this within 6 months, the right to possession of the land reverts to the band, subject to the payment to the Indian who was lawfully in possession of the land from the funds of the band of such compensation for permanent improvements as the minister may determine. Yeah. Correction of certificate or location tickets, whenever a certificate of possession or occupation or a location ticket issued under the Indian Act 1980 or any statute relating to the same subject matter was, in the opinion of the minister, issued to or in the name of the wrong person through mistake or contains any clerical error. Okay, don't think that's a big deal. Cancellation of certificates of location or location tickets. Grants, etc. of reserve lands void. Subject to section 1. Any deed, lease, contract, subsection 2. Instrument, document, or agreement of any kind, whether written or oral, by which a band or a member of a band purports to permit a person other than the member of that band to occupy or use a reserve, or to reside or otherwise exercise any rights from a reserve, is void. So essentially, like, the people who live there can't give permission for others to live there. They can't just assign them a lease, etc., etc. And the minister may by permit in writing authorize any person for a period not exceeding 1 year, or with the consent of the council of the band for any longer period, to occupy or use a reserve, or to reside or otherwise exercise rights on a reserve. Reserve lands are not subject to seizure under legal process. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. All right, let's stop there. When next we meet, we'll read up on trespass on reserves, which is actually kind of a big deal these days. There's been a lot of problems with people who shouldn't be on the res showing up on the res here. I think it's Sixica and Morley, and there's some concern around what that is. I don't want to go into it because it's sort of race based, but yeah, that was a recent thing. There was some issues, anyways. All right, it's time for some weekly humiliations. If my throat holds out, I have a sweet hankering for some stuff. You're good?
Yeah.
All right. So that's no. You weren't good then.
I tried to say, yeah, I mean, but you didn't hear me.
Well, when I say, are you good? And you say, yeah, I stop hearing. All right. Weekly humiliations time. And why is this not showing up? Where the fuck is it? Don't make me angry. Okay, let's try that again. Do you see the window? Fucking hell. Something wonky is happening with my so you know what? I'll just do this. I can get around it. Let me go back. Copy, and we'll go to one of the ones that does exist. Fucking OBS has been real challenging today. And I'll paste into there. Alright, now let's, hopefully, I can just be like, yeah, do this thing. Oh, for fuck, did it seriously not show up? Can I refresh this? Fuck, what a pain in my ass. Some days, man, some days. Okay. If I go here, do that. Oh, and the fucking thing doesn't even show up. Okay.